Game dev studios. There's something really fun about following game devs. It's like watching sports, but the team you're rooting for is also sitting on their And in recent memory, there hasn't been a game dev studio I've been prouder to be a fan of than Bloober Team. Because although recently they released the fantastic Silent Hill 2 remake, before this, Bloober Team was pretty notorious for making half-pieces, which are games that could be masterpieces, but just fell short in the gameplay department. And yes, I just made up that word. But seriously, Bloober Team in the past decade was a powerhouse of making straight-up peak walking simulators. During this time, they released Layers of Fear, Blair Witch, The Medium. They make some pretty good stuff, but no matter what these games do right, usually they have some sort of glaring trade-off that takes away from the whole experience. But in 2017, the team released what I consider to be one of the best story-based horror games ever made. It was a game set in a dystopian, futuristic world full of inequality and violence. It was a game that took a hard look at something like the Block from Dread and scaled it up into a full story. You also can't play it anymore. Yeah, thanks, Bloober.
Skyler, where?
My initial indie game.
I removed it from Steam.
It was, in my opinion, one of Bloober's most underrated games ever. It was a game called...
The year is 2084.
Need to get out.
Don't try to talk. There's another way. If they told me what the world will become, I would not have believed them.
I know what you are.
I am what they fear.
How's the Dream Eater treating you?
Well, I'm not a vegetable yet. A corporate tool of oppression. If you don't remember, you won't remember. That's when they call me to access you. My name is Daniel Lazarski. I'm an observer.
Hello everybody, I am B4 Brandos and welcome to a very long time coming retrospective. This retrospective was actually conceptualized after the Burial at Sea video, but I don't really know what happened. I kind of got a little sidetracked and then it fell into the void of unproduced B4 Brandos videos. But I've decided to cover this game as my first video of 2025 because I can't not talk about this thing. It is so good. I love this game to bits. I need to speak about this thing. You need to know how good it is. Like, I'm not just hyping this up. I am probably this game's #1 fan. I have all the achievements in the game. I've collected all the trading cards. I have one of the only physical copies of the original game. And you know what the kicker is? You know how I really like this game? I don't own a PS4. Anyways, I understand that some of you might not know what Observer is, so here's a brief rundown. And by rundown, I mean lore dump, because when you open the game, you're hit by a Blade Runner-y wall of text which tells you what's going on. So pretty much, Observer takes place in 2084, and Poland, where the game takes place, has been through it, surviving first a global nuclear war, then another war with the remnants of Russia, and after that, a digital plague called the Nanophage that affects those with augmentations, which proves to be a pretty negative thing considering that 86% of people living in Poland have augments installed. Now, while speaking of Poland, the country has literally walled itself off from the rest of the world in a bid for survival and is entirely ruled by the Chiron Corporation. And in true cyberpunk corporate fashion, Chiron has separated the inhabitants of Poland into 3 social classes. A class for the richest and most important, B class for those too important to go into the lower bracket, and C class for anyone Chiron deems low value. Obviously, this drastic separation has led to animosity and violence coming from the lower classes, resulting in high levels of terrorism and violence. In response, Chiron employs the use of special police units called Observers, and they use a device called the Dream Eater, which allows the Observer to, well, observe people's memories, determining their guilt or innocence. However, witnessing people's memories causes a significant amount of mental strain on Observers, and they commonly go insane, a trend that's led Chiron to prohibiting Observers from carrying firearms.
Can you see the headlines? Another leech goes berserk.
But this is where our main character comes in. We play as Daniel Lazarski, an observer who's passed his hard-boiled cop phase and entered his I don't give a shit phase.
Since when do you pigs give a shit about what goes down in the stacks?
We don't. So this master of yours...
Yes, Master Rosak.
Master Rosak.
I'm sure the authorities are handling the situation as we speak.
You might be giving the authorities too much credit.
And a majority of the game takes place inside a C-class apartment block as Daniel attempts to locate his estranged son while tracking an active serial killer in the building. And if that premise doesn't sound cool to you, then we can't be friends, sorry. Observer had a lot of mixed reactions when it came out, because yes, this game is very slow, and honestly some sequences where you go into murder victims' minds can be downright vomit-inducing, but honestly I'm not really a fan of this game because of the going into people's dreams bits. I'm more a fan of it because of the atmosphere. What Bloober Team managed to craft for this world is something I haven't experienced in a long time. And quick disclaimer, the version I will be praising today is the original, not the remaster. I'll be talking about the Redux in the complaining segment because I don't like it. Another thing of note before we get started is that a huge part of what makes this game so good is the voice of the late Rutger Hauer, who voices Daniel Lazarski, and he also played the main antagonist in the original Blade Runner, Roy Batty. His voice and the way he just delivers his lines is so unique. The whole game would be different without him involved. But hey, at the moment you're just taking my word for it, so without further ado, let's get into it and get observing.
Lazarski, you there?
So the game starts with Daniel waking up in his car. Dispatch calls up and reminds us to take our synchrosine. Those are meds that pretty much stop observers from losing it. And after a bit of chatter, our communications are hacked by Daniel's estranged son, Adam. And he begins saying some cryptic things.
Thought it would be easier to hear your voice after all these years, but it really isn't.
Come on, Adam, don't start.
I really thought I could pull it off, you know? I was so close to making a difference, to setting us all free. For once in your life, just listen to me. Whatever happens, I need you to remember, you're not in control.
Adam then hangs up and Daniel traces the call to a C-class district. He then sets off to find his son, and we get the most banging intro to any horror game ever.
Rock fucking butter.
Anyways, arriving at the apartment block, the place looks like someone dropped a paint can of holograms everywhere. Like, what the fuck is this? But getting on the case, we talk to the janitor, getting the location of Adam's apartment. Interestingly, Adam has been living under a false name, Leon Grabinski, almost like he's hiding from someone.
Through the courtyard. Turn right, turn left. Straight ahead, turn right.
Yeah, I got it. Backwards and forwards. Thanks.
So beginning to head to his apartment, we pass through the courtyard and get some of that juicy cyberpunk atmosphere.
Attention citizens, curfew is now in effect in all Class C districts. Remain in your apartments and enjoy your chosen holographic content. Thank you for your cooperation.
Ugh, this place is so disgusting and grimy. I love it. Also, something you may have noticed, I'm actually not sure if you couldn't notice it, but the entire building is nauseatingly covered in holograms. And the reason for this in the lore is that Chiron started a program to make the city look a little nicer while they did repairs on the buildings. However, the repairs never happened. And after a string of incidents of people getting hurt, the program was abandoned. And in typical corporate fashion, Chiron didn't take away any of the hologram projectors, which is why a ton of them are all glitchy, because they're old. Man, that little fact right there is absolutely outraging my neighbor's dog. He's just, he hears a bit of corporate injustice and he's like, oh. I just kind of love how this is something the corporation thought looked nice. Like, if my apartment building was covered in this crap, I would actually turn into Johnny Silverhand. Anyways, approaching Adam's apartment, we can hear something kind of weird moving around the area. There's probably nothing. But entering Adam's apartment, we find that it's been ransacked. It's clear there's been a struggle, and once we move into the main area, Daniel finds a headless corpse.
Abnormal stress levels.
Coincidentally, the building begins going into lockdown. Daniel has a panic attack but calms himself with the fact that the body might not be Adam's. And setting up a crime scene, the main gameplay of Observer begins. Daniel is equipped with 2 scanning modes, biological and technical. Using biovision, the player can analyze pretty much anything biological. Substances, bodies, blood, that kind of thing. While tech vision allows us to scan anything that's electronic. And while I've seen some criticism that Observer is literally just scan stuff the game, I think the detective elements come into play a lot stronger when you get to the side cases, which is something I'll discuss once we finish the main story. Anyways, doing some detective work, we don't really find anything too valuable at the scene. The victim has an ID scrambler, making profiling impossible, and the only thing we really gain from our sweep is that the victim received a call from someone whose initials were HN just before they were killed. Something of interest, however, is that it kind of looks like the cuts on the victim's body were made by claws, but that's ridiculous, no way. Anyway, after getting everything we can from the scene, we begin looking for a way out since the lockdown triggered Adam's apartment security. And while looking around, we can find a few things that tell us a little bit about Adam. Like here we have a digital photo frame that has a family photo, except Daniel's face is blurred out. It's clear that the two are definitely not on speaking terms. Another thing we can find is a Chiron ID card. Turns out Adam had been chief researcher there for some time, but with him living in a C-class block and under a different name, I'd wager he probably doesn't work there anymore. Finally, we also find a hidden code panel, which dances to the tune of 1984. And why is that? Well, Adam owns and displays a copy of George Orwell's 1984.
Printed on real paper. Bit archaic for you, Adam.
It seems that he has gone from working for the corporation to being very anti-corporation. And it also seems that Adam finds similarities between the book of 1984 and the current state of Poland. And he's not wrong, because the developers did something very cool with the world of Observer. See, usually cyberpunk is a mixture of science fiction and dystopian fiction, but Observer tosses out the dystopia and replaces it with a particular flavor of dystopia, with that being 1984. Now for this video, I have read through the book. Look at me, I'm such an intellectual, but Adam is right. There are quite a few through lines, and the first interesting comparison I can draw is the makeup of the world. In Observer, a third world war broke out called the Great Decimation, which absolutely destroyed the planet. And in the confusion, Chiron scooped up power in Poland and established themselves as the new government. This is really similar to 1984, since in that world, it's implied that once again, a third world war broke out and hundreds of cities were destroyed. And once again, in the confusion, a new political party called INGSOC sprung up and took control of Britain and a few other countries. But the similar history of these two worlds doesn't actually stop there. In the game, we can read some articles that imply that Poland is always under attack from outsiders, whether it's the remnants of Russia or just general scavengers. This is pretty similar to how in 1984, in order to maintain control, INGSOC is constantly at war with the two other world powers, Eurasia and East Asia. But a big part of the book is that we don't know if these superpowers are actually fighting, because halfway through the book, the main character Winston is present for an announcement, and in the announcement, Big Brother says they have begun fighting East Asia, while their previous enemy, Eurasia, is now their ally. Oh, and also, we were never at war with Eurasia, just keep that in mind. There's also another point in the book when Winston is caught in the middle of a bombing run, seemingly sent from a warring superpower, except it's kind of implied that it could have actually been INGSOC that sent the bombing run, since the only thing that was really damaged was a very low-class district. And this leads into my second comparison to Observer, which is the class system. In 1984, society is split up into 3 levels. The proles, who represent a majority of the population and take on the hard labor, low-paying jobs. The outer party, who holds jobs closer to the heart of INGSOC and help them maintain their power. Oh, just a side note, in the book, Winston actually works as a part of the outer party. He works in the records department where he edits, censors, and burns historical material in order to keep the narrative exactly what INGSOC wants. And I'm not sure if it's a rock solid comparison, but I do find it interesting that the main character of 1984 and of Observer are both middle-class citizens who are privy to the lies of their superiors. It gives them a more unique perspective when they explore the world of classes they live in.
Corporate goons all over the place, securing the area.
You mean covering their asses?
Anyways, finally there's the inner party, who are the true controlling power of society. They live in relative luxury and follow Big Brother's teachings to the letter. In Observer, this is pretty similar. C-class citizens live in tenement buildings nicknamed the Stacks. Also, I assume they're called that since you can literally see mega structures have been built over these apartments, almost like Chiron wants to cover them up and forget about them. Anyway, C-class also handles a brunt of physical labor that goes on in this world, and of course, they work the worst jobs available. Something interesting is that you can find a terminal at some point in the game with job listings in it, and this shit absolutely sucks. Like, how about a job as a data courier, where you need to transport sensitive corporate data between Chiron outposts in B and C-class districts? The catch, however, is that you need to get your recent memory wiped once per week. I mean, this job sucks, yeah, but you can't say you won't have that new job energy for your entire career, right? Or how about a job where you perform maintenance on holo projectors in C-class buildings? Sounds pretty alright. Well, it is, just as long as your only goal in life is to not starve to death, because you get paid in food for this job. But finally, my absolute favorite C-class job is the vermin control position, where it's implied that your entire job is going around beating rats and pigeons to death with a blunt instrument, and you only get paid if you rack up a high enough kill streak. You know, I kind of want this to be turned into a game, you know, where you play as Daniel and then you have to go around this C-class block just beating the shit out of pigeons.
Great. Fucking great. What? I am what they fear. I'm right on your tail. Hey, how about you shut the fuck up? Come on. Bingo. Fuck. This can't be happening. It's not fucking happening.
Anyways, back to 1984, you have B-class citizenship, and there's not much to say about these guys. Being B-class is probably the most normal you can get in this world, and in the game, we don't get much information on the kind of lifestyle they're used to, but from what I can gather, B-class is one hell of an upgrade from C-class, since throughout the game, we can hear people overjoyed at the simple prospect of getting a citizenship upgrade. Our very own Daniel Lazarski is B-class, and he has a very low opinion of the Stacks, which probably means wherever he lives is pretty nice, relatively.
Jesus, Adam, the Stacks. You just had to hit bottom, huh?
Finally, you have A-class. A-class, just like B-class, is a bit shrouded in mystery. This is a class of citizens made up of doctors, corporate executives, and other people that 100% deserve to be A-class over anyone else in this world. They're very important, but the ambiguity around A-class actually does serve a pretty interesting plot point. The existence of C-class is often justified by Chiron as being necessary, since they live in a post-apocalypse world. You know, things are hard, resources are scarce, everyone needs to do their part to help lift society back up. What's interesting though is the existence of A-class directly contradicts the purpose of C-class, because A-class is sheer luxury, even by our world standards. Your quality of life is great, you'll live in a very spacious, decadent place, and by extension, you're also filthy, stinking rich. And the thing is that A-class is Chiron. It's the level of society that runs society. But everyone within A-class is so corrupt and selfish that they don't even care that the systems they've put in place obviously don't need to exist. Their disdain for the lower classes is pretty clear, but they run everything. So what's C-class or B-class gonna do? So yeah, in comparison to 1984, it's not a watertight one-for-one parallel. In the game, it's implied that saying the wrong thing about Chiron could get you disappeared, but in 1984, even the idea that you don't love Big Brother can get you sent to the Ministry of Love. Also, for anyone who hasn't read the book, the Ministry of Love is not a nice place. They will put you in the femur breaker from SCP. But I do think Adam's belief in the similarities between his world and the book's world is pretty well found. Chiron controls the narrative in Poland. For all the citizens know, the rest of the world could be getting on just fine. But because they can't survive without Chiron's crushing oppression, who wants to take the risk of finding out they weren't lying? So yeah, that's the kind of world that we're in. And that little nod to 1984 really helps you pick out just how sinister the ruling power of Poland really is. And I'm sorry I just went on a big tangent. I know you just want to see the game, but it kind of is important that you guys understand just how evil Chiron is from the get-go, because overall it will help you see the story in a much larger lens and it gives it much more meaning.
This just doesn't feel right. You're still alive. I know it.
and away.
Leaving Adam's apartment, the entire building is still going into lockdown, and our comms have been jammed, pretty much leaving us on our own. And we've officially entered the main setting of the game. Daniel now has to solve this murder while he's trapped alone in this shithole of an apartment block. So with the lockdown finishing up, we return to the lobby to find the janitor left his office door open. And from here, we can either enter the office and access the tenant register without permission, or we can go and talk to the janitor at the front door. Also, if you do decide to use the computer without the janitor's permission, you get jump scared by him. And just give me a sec. I know I keep pausing the story. I can't defend how bad the jump scares are in this game. You will not believe it.
Need to get out.
You again? Not a good idea to sneak up on me, you know.
Bloober Team designed this game to be scary, but I'd say it's more like a thriller with jump scares, because bloody hell, somehow the developers that made Layers of Fear got the idea in their heads that as long as you make an extremely loud noise and have something jump out in front of the player, then it's terrifying. But it's not, it's lame. And every time it happens, you just roll your eyes a little bit harder, because a lot of the time, you're not in any actual danger. But I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So talking to the janitor, we learn that he's a war veteran named Janus who suffered major brain damage after his convoy was attacked. But Janus helps us locate 2 apartments occupied by people with the initials of HN. And before we head off, I just want to point out that Janus constantly repeats a single phrase.
Out. 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 Need to get out.
Interesting, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, making our way to apartment 106, we talk to Hannah Nader, who turns out to be a dead end, but that isn't to say that she's not important, and ringing the video screen, we get a taste of how we'll be seeing humans in this game. Throughout the whole apartment, you can talk to residents through their door callers, but what we see on the video screen is never entirely right. The images of people are distorted, oversaturated, not even entirely human sometimes. Almost like we're seeing caricatures of the people we're talking to. And that doesn't change with Hannah Nader, because ringing her doorbell, we are met with nothing but an image of a cold black eye.
Mind if I ask you a few questions?
Mrs.
Excuse me?
Mrs. Nader.
And what makes Hannah different from the other residents is she doesn't care the building is going into lockdown. And prying a little further, we can find that she's actually a survivor of the Nanophage, which gives me an opportunity to quickly talk about it. Now, I mentioned this at the very start of the video, but I think it's very important to bring up since it's pretty much the only thing anyone cares about in this universe. Now, Nanophage is possibly a worst case scenario for an augmented society. You know, like people in the Deus Ex universe, they're all like, oh, ouchie, my augment's hurt. Oh, I need some neuroprosine. Yeah, well, buddy, just be grateful that your augments aren't eating you from the inside out. Because that's pretty much what the Nanophage is, and it's all thanks to the way augments work. Pretty much in sci-fi, it's kind of always hard to explain how a robot arm is controlled by the brain, but in Observer, the answer is easy. It's nanomachines that interface the user and the augment. Except all nanomachines have a random glitch that can occur known as the AA glitch, where the nanites, instead of interlinking with the host, begin to treat it as hostile. The nanomachines then begin to reproduce, with each new nanobot also containing the AA glitch. Over time, the nanites begin to wear away the user, causing delirium, aggression, and eventually death. What makes the virus so dangerous, though, is that it's a nanobot. It's versatile, and that means it's incredibly contagious. You can get the AA glitch just from being on the same network as someone who's got it. You don't even have to be in the same room as them. It's nicknamed the disease of the 21st century because it's basically incurable. But that doesn't mean that Chiron hasn't tried. At the time of Observer, the most common treatment of the nanophage is to simply rip out all of the augments. But this isn't just a world where people want cool robot arms. A lot of people have augments that they need to survive, which means that taking them out usually results in death. All up, recovery from the nanophage stands at 4%, which leaves most of Poland in constant fear. And Hannah Nader is one of those 4%. Although after talking a little bit, it's pretty clear that a simple brush with the phage can destroy your life. Despite surviving, her wife was taken away by Chiron, and now she lives with physical and mental scars that will never truly heal.
Want to see the scar tissue on my face and neck? It's quite an embroidery. The little monsters really outdid themselves. Or do I have to show you what's left of my arm? Would that satisfy your curiosity?
And that's where the lockdowns come from. In the hopes of containing the spread, if the AA glitch is detected, the entire block will shut down, and Chiron staff will arrive to contain the situation. And although there aren't many reliable sources on what containment actually means, there's rumors of sick people simply disappearing, being experimented on, and even killed.
Mrs. Nader, I'm just doing my job.
Huh, yes, I've heard that one before. When the cleaners took my Laura away, one of them turned to me and said precisely that. I never saw her again. Not even the body. It's like she never existed.
In Observer, there's residents who won't even talk to you since they think you're one of Chiron's cleaners. In the end, the world of Observer is tightly gripped in fear. And why wouldn't it be? All through the block, you can find nanophage patient cards which show you what the virus really does. Overall, there's a lot of uncertainty, and the shadow of the nanophage looms over the game's story.
You best get on with your duties, officer. I'm sure you have your hands full.
So long, Mrs. Nader. Helena Novak it is.
So our next stop is apartment 104 in search of one Helena Novak. Arriving there, we find the door open, and entering, we discover a badly injured man.
Jesus.
Trying to talk to him, the man is drowning in his own blood, so Daniel decides it's time for a neural interrogation. Now with the dream sequences, in a game where you play as a thought detective, you'd think that these sequences would be the bee's knees, but I think they kind of suck, to be honest. They try to convey the haze of memory, especially in a dying person's mind, but it all boils down to just being a big old haunted house. There are a lot of loud noises and a lot of areas to walk through, but that's just about it. It's kind of up to the player to decipher the story that's being told in these sequences. So that's why I'm not going to give you a play-by-play of this part. It does feel like I'm doing a little bit of a disservice to you guys, but it doesn't really make any sense. It's not like something like Silent Hill where, you know, every room has a meaning, you know? In Observer, there's just some random shit happening for no reason most of the time. So I'm gonna skip all that stuff and I'm just gonna tell you what they're actually trying to say to the player. What we get from this dude is that he's a guy named Amir Novak. He's Helena Novak's husband, and through the memory, we learned that Amir was a drug dealer and an addict. However, his dealing got him sent to prison, which made his dependency even worse. Sometime after he got out of prison, Amir met Helena, and the two bonded, eventually getting married. However, with Amir's criminal record, he was unable to find a job, which put a lot of strain on his marriage. Then he got attacked by this thing just before we arrived, and Helena escaped to somewhere in the building. Yep, that's it. A whole 20-minute sequence condensed down into one paragraph. And I know someone who's already going to say, oh, Brandos, you didn't cover the dream sequences properly. And you know what I say to that? I say, watch this clip and tell me something that's important to talk about here. Oh man, I'm getting too worked up. I need to make a joke. Hey guys, League of Legends players be like,
you can do it. I know you can. You can do it. I know you can. You're strong enough to beat this thing.
Yeah, those are stink lines.
Okay, I am underselling this a bit because there is a little more substance to the dream, since Daniel might be getting haunted by some sort of digital ghost. Because at a point pretty early on in the dream, we hear this strange groaning that doesn't really seem to be related to the narrative. But you know, it's probably nothing, and you know, I have a good track record of saying it's nothing on this channel, and usually I'm right. Also, as a part of my penance for talking shit about the dream sequences, I'm going to talk about something I actually really love about them. And that little thing is that the title of Observer isn't really accurate to what Daniel does. The Dream Eater doesn't just allow you to observe someone's memories, it more plugs the interrogator's mind into the interrogatees. So something I actually really like about these dream sequences is sometimes Daniel's memories slip into the current memory we're observing, and we get a little bit more background on the guy.
Now I can see right through you. I saw that underneath all your muscles and tattoos, you were like a big wounded animal. Lost. Alone.
Hey, at least you knew what you were getting into.
Yeah, I guess I did.
Forsaking all others?
To have and to hold from this day forward, until death do us part.
Any regrets?
None.
Wake up! Something's wrong with me. Get help! Get help!
And yeah, this one is simple, but it's more the start of a backstory that continues through these neural interrogations. Anyway, so after getting attacked by Foxy, we get pulled out of the interrogation when Amir suddenly dies, meaning our only lead is to find wherever Helena ran off to. So we do a little bit of sleuthing by talking to some of Helena's interesting neighbors.
KPD, like to ask you some questions.
Certainly, officer. Always glad to do my civic duty. Biggest fucking cock tease you've ever seen. Always toying with me, bending over when reaching for the lock, all naked underneath her clothes. She knows I'm watching too. She likes to make me itch, cooped up with that junky meathead. I mean, what does he have that I don't? They're all like that, you know? Fucking mongoloid bitch. Now I hope she gets what she fucking deserves, so that she knows she's fucked up. She'll have no choice but to come to me, begging. But it'll be too late, you hear me? Too late!
Okay. How about you shut the fuck up?
And we're able to deduce that she's probably hidden in the tattoo parlor downstairs. Now on the way there, I do want to talk about something else I really love about this game, and that is that you're not playing as Daniel on any other night on the job. This is a bad situation, and he's neurally interrogating some pretty mentally broken people. So something super cool that happens between missions is that memories Daniel just witnessed usually follow him out into the real world. And while they make for some pretty boring jump scares, I think I find them more interesting from a story point of view because it shows just how mentally taxing it is to be an observer. I also love that the story doesn't just wait for you to get to the next interrogation before Daniel resumes losing his mind. It's all happening in real time. So here are a couple examples of my favorite hallucinations. Number one, I was walking through the apartment block and I thought I heard the groans of that weird digital ghost we saw in Amir's memories. And yeah, it turns out I did. Number two is that we suddenly get another memory flash from Amir's time in prison.
You're not getting out of here.
Number three, this one's my personal favorite. We'll talk about this a little more in depth later, but through the apartment block, you can see remote control cars that drive away from you. And if you follow this one that goes into the kitchen and pick it up, we're treated to this moment.
Don't you recognize me?
It's just these little moments and little details that make the world of Observer so special to me. There's not a single inch of this apartment block that the developers didn't put some thought into, and you'll be seeing that more and more as we progress through the game. Anyway, back to tracking Helena Novak, we enter the tattoo parlor, which all seems pretty normal, and by normal I mean fucking dope. Like whatever aesthetic this is, I love it. I want to live in it. But heading into the back area, we find Helena Novak. But she's dead. But it seems like she's given us the lead we were after anyways, dying right in front of a hidden key code panel. But not being able to hack it, we decide to commence a neural interrogation, which for your information is super illegal in the Observer universe.
Warning. Attempting a necroneural connection is in direct violation of the Postmortem Observation Act of 2061. Authorization denied.
Like connecting to a living person already messes some observers up, but connecting to a dead person is kind of like buying Viagra off eBay. It is not safe, it is going to mess you up, and you should not do it. I can't relate, by the way, this is just a joke, it's just a bit. But despite the warnings against trying the procedure, Daniel just says, fuck it, my mental is strong, and turns off the safety protocols on the Dream Eater.
Disabled. Warning. Brainwave activity sensor offline. Emergency extraction procedure offline.
better be worth it.
So through some shattered memories, we are then spoon-fed Helena's story. As previously mentioned, her husband Amir was having trouble finding a job due to his criminal record, which led to Helena needing to take on double shifts working as a programmer at Chiron. However, the money wasn't enough, and one day she was approached by someone who offered her a deal.
Come here. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
The deal was for Helena to smuggle data out of Chiron in exchange for quite a bit of money, and the anonymous party that hired her also gave her an undetectable databank augmentation to do it.
You sure they won't find it?
It's got a built-in scrambler and a shielded frame. No external scanning equipment can penetrate it. It's ghostware. Undetectable. Unless you know exactly where to look.
However, the longer Helena smuggled data, the more paranoid she got, believing that she was being watched constantly and that Chiron was onto her. And just as this paranoia hit its peak, her apartment was broken into by the unseen killer that messed up Amir. And while the killer was busy, Helena made a break for the tattoo parlor, believing it would keep her safe. But the killer caught up to her just before she made it. Now, there are two things to note in this neural interrogation. The first is that our digital ghost shows up once again and is getting increasingly active every time we perform a neural interrogation. Since this time it actively hunts for us, and spooky scary lore out of the way, I'm gonna say it, the stealth in this game sucks. This monster is really stupid to the point where he will literally just teleport closer to you if he can't find you, and if it spots you, it's pretty much game over, because my man Daniel runs like he just remembered he left the stove on at home, except he's trying to commit insurance fraud. Strangely, this is a bit of a trend in Bloober games, which I noticed when I played the Silent Hill 2 remake. Like in the original Silent Hill 2, James would fucking send it. Man was making strides, covering ground. He was hauling ass. But in the remake made by Bloober, bro would only just beat Daniel Lazarski in a foot race. Like what do these guys have against running? I don't know about you, but if I was an observer, right, and my whole job is just looking at people's memories, and then this ghoulish motherfucker shows up and starts hunting me in this simulation, I'd be out of there. Fuck this. Fuck Adam. I don't care. Another little detail in this interrogation is that we get a little more background on what exactly happened between Adam and Daniel. From what we get here, it seems like Daniel's wife was sick with something, and the disease could be fixed with extensive augmentation. However, Daniel was apprehensive about the whole thing, and that's all we get.
Is Mom gonna be alright?
She's sick, Adam. Must have a little faith. It's just hard to say.
So tune in next neural interrogation for another episode of how Daniel's life became so shit. Anyway, waking up, the whole connecting to a dead person thing has hit Dan pretty hard. Hell, it hit me hard. This is another reason on why I don't do play-by-plays on the neural interrogations, because 50% is actual story and the other 50% is just vomit-inducing shit. But the good news is that we now have the code we needed. Entering it, a nearby door opens. So heading into the hidden room, we can move into a basement area. And here we can find the exact room where Helena got her databank augmentation installed.
A surgical chop shop. Just what we need.
It seems whoever owns this place must have also been working as a street augmentation surgeon. Flipping on the power though, we suddenly realize we're not alone. So now being trapped in the basement, we have to find another way out, which ends up being down as we crawl through a drainage tunnel, ending up in the basement. And this part is probably my favorite in the game because we've just exhausted our first lead. You know, things are looking pretty grim, and by this point the player is probably immersed enough in Observer to really get sucked into that world, and the basement takes full advantage of that. The atmosphere down here is just incredible. I mean, when you see that there are apartments down here, it's just something else. You really have have to have made a wrong turn in life to end up living in one of these. It's so depressing. But apart from that, it's also pretty disturbing. In the ambience, you can hear some sort of screeching. There's a radio you can find that you can't switch off or even get close to. The further you move into the block, the more it becomes clear that Daniel isn't coping very well with the multiple interrogations we've gone through, and we start experiencing at first subtle hallucinations that quickly spiral into full-on reality-bending ones. Like Amir's interrogation, some of Helena's trauma begins leaking into the real world too, with her paranoia of being watched showing up as a ton of cameras following us around. Also, these cameras play a much larger role in the story as well, so I am going to bring them up again. Don't forget about them just yet. Moving on, we get called over to a door and begin having a conversation with what seems to be Daniel's wife, and the whole thing is kind of twisted up. The player can select all these different dialogue options, but none of them really make any sense.
I'm feeling obnoxious.
What is it, dear?
The macabre.
Yes.
But it's also kind of implied here that Daniel believes he is very guilty of something, as for some reason he starts reading himself his rights.
I have the right to remain silent. Anything I say can and will be used against me in court of law.
Uh-huh.
I have the right to an attorney. Do I understand my rights? Fuck yeah.
Let's skip this part, okay?
I'm losing control.
Try not to think about me. You were good.
Good at talking out of my ass. Don't leave me.
You were my man. This intercom is offline.
Another interesting little detail here is that in the game, when you talk to someone through a door, normally this little ring lights up when they say something, but here the light never turns on, which means, I don't need to state the obvious, there's no one actually there. Exiting the basement, Daniel snaps out of it, and we're back in the real world. With all our leads running thin though, we decide to track down the owner of the tattoo parlor. So we go talk to Janus, who's hanging out in the courtyard, and he tells us that a guy named Jack Carnus owns the parlor. And finding the door unlocked, Daniel heads inside. Suddenly, the walls turn from brick to polished wood covered in ornate paintings. The furniture is now expensive. Somehow, we've apparently stumbled inside another neural interrogation, and our suspicions are confirmed as we witness a collection of memories from Jack. And I really like Jack Carnus. He's one of the more interesting characters in the game, mostly because it's not just like, I'm doing bad things because I want money. I'm doing bad things because I'm a huge piece of shit. You know, he's like one of the genuinely kind of evil characters that you can also see where he's coming from. Anyway, turns out Jack was not always in C class. He was originally an A class augmentation doctor who didn't really care about his patients and instead only wanted to push the boundaries of what could be done with technology. He was heavily scrutinized in the medical community due to his reputation of having no empathy. However, he was exceptionally good at his job, giving his critics no real basis to stand on. That was until one day when Jack installed an experimental augmentation in an A-class patient who hadn't ordered it. But the patient's body rejected the implant and was seriously injured. Jack was stripped of his medical license and shunned by the medical community. However, believing his research was too important to be shelved, he moved to a C-class district and started his secret augmentation clinic that was hidden beneath his tattoo parlor. By the way, this is only something I've only just kind of realized, but I really find it interesting that Jack's other hobby is tattoos. It's almost really blends with the way that he operated when he was a surgeon. Jack considers himself to be more of an artist than an actual doctor. He's pushing the boundaries of what can be done with augmentation. He considers augmentation to be his paint and the human body to be his canvas.
Caution, low synchronization. Administer synchrosine.
What the fuck just happened?
After learning all this, Daniel suddenly wakes up next to Jack's body. Strangely, everything in the room has already been scanned by Daniel, and yeah, we have entered certified tweaker territory. Like when we entered the apartment, after this exact moment, Daniel discovered Jack's body, scanned everything in the room, and connected without even knowing it. Guys, I think Daniel might be losing it, maybe. But around Jack's apartment, we can observe some pretty snazzy stuff. He was clearly well off, and based off of this audio log we can find in his tattoo parlor, he was also clearly a fucking complainer.
It is the 7th day of my forcefully imposed penance, and I can already attest without any doubt that this place is in fact hell.
Does Jack not know that his place would go for like $4,000 weekly in New York? This would be classified as a luxurious studio apartment, so just shut up, okay? Oh, actually, he kind of is shut up. Permanently. Huh. An interesting thing we can find in his apartment, by the way, is that if we check Jack's emails, there's a message in his inbox from the husband of the patient Jack had hurt. According to the email, the patient did not survive, and there's also an image attached. Now, I don't know if I can actually show the image, but in it, it looks like the patient has no eyes. And I'm going to be doing a little bit of a game theory here, but earlier in the game, we can actually talk to a blind resident who is scheduled to get some eye augmentations installed. And then in Jack's clinic, we can find a pair of eyes ready and waiting. But I actually believe there's a little more to this backstory than is shown, because Jack only came to the C-Class district to continue his experimental work. So I think it's possible that these are actually the experimental augmented eyes that nearly killed the A-Class patient. So just a cool little connection, I think. Anyway, despite being a little worried for our sanity, a good thing does come out of everything already being scanned, as we find out that Jack managed to stab the killer with his cane, leaving us a trail to follow. And I just love that as soon as you exit the apartment, Daniel's vision starts going all rotund, and you just know that we are still tripping. So as we follow the killer's blood trail, the layout of the apartment stops making sense, and instead of traveling through locations, we seemingly begin walking through recent memories, like just after we exited Adam's apartment at the start of the game, or Jack's augmentation clinic, or my personal favorite, that one time we got trapped in the basement. Yeah, that was fun. My absolute favorite moment down here though is that when we follow this light down a tunnel, I just can't stop seeing this scene as Daniel throwing out his back. It's so funny. Bro's got that fentanyl, you know, you do like too many neural interrogations, you just like, oh, my back! Oh. But after slipping a disc, Daniel is back on track with hunting this killer down. And we are now locking in. There will be no more hallucinations going forward.
The walls are made of meat. I don't get it. I'm not even plugged in. Am I fucking losing it?
Yeah, I think you might be, dude. Something cool here too is that Daniel tries to pull up his biovision to scan this stuff, but nothing comes up. But if you use the electromagnetic vision, the meat is strangely highlighted, which makes me think that we are just kind of seeing cables here. But cables or not, we eventually make it to a door with a keypad where we're suddenly transported outside. Standing at a metal gate, we get to see what the streets of Krakow look like outside of a C-Class district, and I think it's strangely beautiful. It's grimy and dark, and you can feel this kind of underlying history in this place. I just love it! But moving on, we enter a questionable club where questionable stuff is happening, and we can hear Daniel's wife calling out to us. And pressing a button, this scene plays.
Daniel, I'm cured. Don't you like me this way?
Yeah, this game's weird, man. But the game isn't just shoving the funny sex number in your face for no reason. That's actually the last 2 digits of the code we need to get out of here. So entering said code, we get out of Dodge and walk into an abandoned apartment. And I'm gonna skip explaining the next couple of minutes of the game because, well, listen guys, I am still Observer's #1 fan, remember that? So I'm allowed to not like bits and pieces of the game, and I don't like this bit. And this is because Observer sometimes enters the realm of incomprehensibility, where Daniel is hallucinating so hard, we just don't know what's going on or why it's happening, or even if it is happening. And mind you, I love games where you don't know what's going on. I've played the shit out of Evil Within, but Observer just takes things a little bit too far in my opinion and starts making Daniel see stuff that, as far as I can tell, has no deeper meaning or reason to be there. Observer is really annoying because sometimes stuff has a deeper meaning and other times stuff looks like it might have a deeper meaning, but it just doesn't. It's just there. It makes it really hard to kind of decipher the story because on one hand you're like, okay, these showers clearly represent Amir struggling with his addiction, right? What the hell does the flying baby TV represent, huh? You know, maybe I am actually just missing the masterpiece of this game. Maybe it is giving you the experience of going crazy. Although there is another bit where our digital ghost friend shows up again and chases us, and I think this sequence illustrates another problem with the game. And that problem is, if you don't take into account Daniel's absolute nonchalant running and get moving just a little too late, you instantly die. The big monster dude catches you, and all you can think is, you can die in this game? And this is a big problem because there's not enough moments where your life is on the line in Observer for you to actually give a shit about the Left 4 Dead 2 charger coming at you at this part. There are just so many sequences in this game where crazy stuff happens to you and you're just completely fine. So players actually get conditioned to associate loud and scary stuff with it's just loud and scary. It's not going to actually kill me or give me a game over. I think there's just a couple of missed opportunities to implement some actual gameplay into the experience. Like, there is really not much player input into playing Observer. There's only a couple of skill checks and they are really easy. I mean, let's go down the list of actual gameplay features. If you come across a keypad, you either have to find the code or you can press middle mouse button and the game does it for you. That's a missed minigame potential. By the way, they do fix that in the Redux. Or what about Synchrosine? I'd mentioned this at the start of the game. Daniel has to take these meds that stop him from kind of going crazy. And if you don't take them for quite a while, your vision starts going blurry and you start seeing more jump scares around the apartment block, but nothing actually happens to you. You can't die from losing synchronicity. Why not make it a mechanic where if you start to lose it, then the big monster man spawns in and starts patrolling the apartment looking for you, you know, like Mr. X. That would seriously change the game. It's just weird having a game that's a 98% walking sim and then you go ahead and put instant deaths in there for some reason. Personally, I think they should have taken notes from a game like Soma, because even while that game is a huge walking sim, if you fuck around, you find out. In that game, you're conditioned to stay away from anything remotely scary because it could legitimately kill you. Observer doesn't do this though. Sometimes something will kill you and other times it won't. It's strange because Bloober Team clearly tried to incorporate some gameplay mechanics with the scanning modes and detective work, but when it came to ramping up the gameplay to where a little bit of strategy might be required from the player, they were just like, I don't know. Anyways, tangent over, I'm gonna stop complaining. So Daniel eventually stops tripping and we can once again track the killer through the apartment, which eventually leads us to the attic. And entering, we hear growling, heavy footsteps, and we can even get a glimpse of something moving. Although we quickly find that the blood trail has ended, and while opening a hatch, lucky for Daniel, however, he's one of those 50-year-olds that can survive falling 40 meters and landing on a hard surface. The killer, however, is not as much as a unit as our boy Dan and was caught by a net of exposed wires, killing him instantly. And while speaking of him, wow, he's ugly. Scanning his neural augment, we're able to identify him as Victor Medursky, and he has some serious augmentations. Hydraulic legs, claws, he's like Atom Smasher Crackhead edition. But with him dead, we have no way to identify the body in Atom's apartment. So Daniel decides he needs to connect to Victor's mind to solve this case.
God knows why you fucking kill people. But I want my fucking son back.
Connecting up, Victor's memories are pretty straightforward, and most of what we see through the interrogation is nothing but a tragic life story. Being raised in the very apartment building the game takes place in, Victor was born with malformed legs, which led to many people within the building mocking him. Even his own father was disgusted with his son. This mockery led Victor to isolate himself as he grew older, and a little bit of time before the game, he underwent gene therapy and extreme augmentation in order to take on a form he felt more more akin to, and this was the form of a werewolf. As a kid, Victor's favorite story was Little Red Riding Hood, but he didn't relate to Red, he related to the wolf and how it was an outsider that was treated as a monster. However, the gene therapy didn't go according to plan since wolves in the Observer universe are extinct, and Victor was left only partially spliced to his specifications. Around this time, Victor became increasingly addicted to drugs. Combining this with his mental state, it was enough to break him fully. At this point, he was contacted by an unknown individual who manipulated him into killing Jack, Helena, Amir, and the victim in Adam's apartment. In the end, though, all this info doesn't really end up helping us since Victor saw the headless victim as some sort of white doe. So we don't get any closer to figuring out who the dead man is. Also, for a few quick side notes, there are some small things I need to mention about this neural interrogation, with the first thing being that we learn a lot more about Daniel's wife, and a few pieces of his story fall into place. Except the cool thing is you can only find this moment if you get a couple collectibles through the game. See, if you explored the apartment block a little bit before doing the main story, you would be able to find 3 roses, and they clearly have an effect on Daniel.
A real deal? Why leave it here? You fucking kidding me? Who's doing this? No, for fuck's sake, Gertrude. Give me a break.
But if you find all 3 roses, then in this interrogation, we can find this grave with the headstone reading Laura Lazarski, and the pieces slide into place just a little bit more.
She's not here. It's just a body. A piece of flesh. Nothing more. It didn't have to be this way. We can do better. I can do better.
Waking up, Daniel makes his way through the basement area again, and we eventually make it to Victor's den, I guess you could call it. But exploring a little bit, we find what we've been looking for, the head of the body in Adam's apartment. And uncovering it, it's revealed that...
No. Oh God. No.
Yep, it was Adam this whole time. Daniel then nearly loses it completely before we're contacted by Adam.
Dad?
What the hell?
Dad, are you there?
Who tells us to come to a place near the apartment block called Sanctuary. He also tells us in no uncertain terms not to connect to the head. But dude, I am a child, alright? You tell me not to touch that hot iron, I am gonna... Alright, let's see what's going on in my son's head. So this is actually a pretty funny interrogation. You don't need to connect to the head in order to progress because we actually get nothing out of it. See, we know that for some reason Adam hates his father, and for that reason, bro has created a memory protection algorithm that I don't think you can actually beat at all. So all this interrogation really serves to do is fuck Daniel up even more. But hey, at least it's fun. But heading to Sanctuary, we travel through the sewers and are constantly hallucinating the digital ghost dude. And it honestly kind of starts to get annoying at this point. I understand it's meant to show that Daniel is losing it and the digital ghost is getting closer and closer, but I already know that I'm not in any danger. I feel like Metro Man on his billionth time fighting Megamind. Just please, become a credible threat or go away.
Don't care. Don't care, still don't care.
I'm doing a lot of complaining, but that's okay because we have reached a part that I actually really like. And that part is that we have reached the surface. And I really love how much of a bittersweet breath of fresh air this scene is. We've just stopped this killer we've been hunting all game, but it's becoming clear that there's more stuff going on here than we can understand. Daniel is losing it, we're pretty much helpless, and yet in the distance, you can see this vast city. We can see skyscrapers, flashing lights, advertisements. There's a civil world out there, but we can't reach it. The only thing Daniel can do is continue on and see this through. So entering Sanctuary, we find that it's an old cathedral that's been converted into a sort of VR lounge. There's a pod waiting for us, and we get in, being promptly transported to a virtual world where we find...
Yes. I know it's hard to believe after all you've seen, but I need you to trust me on this. We don't have much time.
And here we get answers for absolutely everything in the game. Adam explains that back when he was chief researcher at Chiron, he was working on a way to transfer a consciousness into a digital form. Chiron shut down his project though, which led to Adam going underground. He hired Helena to smuggle his project data out of the company. However, Chiron found out and manipulated Victor into killing everyone involved in the project, with Adam only just being able to use his own tech to escape into the net. Chiron saw this coming though and activated the building's lockdown to cut off his escape into the larger net. They then sent a virus after him, and at this point Adam called Daniel at the start of the game hoping he would be able to help. Which brings us to now. Adam asks us to find where Chiron is transmitting the lockdown order from so that we can disable it. Daniel agrees, and suddenly we're back in the real world, but this time it is with a purpose. Daniel now has a chance to mend bridges with his son. He has the opportunity to show him that he actually cares, even if his son is nothing but a digital consciousness now. So looking around Sanctuary, we find a secret entrance to a Chiron facility, and upon entering it, we quickly find out that they're running experiments on people infected with the Nanophage.
It really is the fucking phage. Okay. We've been exposed anyway. Keep it together.
This is one of the facilities sick people disappear into, although something has clearly gone wrong here and there seems to be a security breach. Continuing forwards though, we come face to face with our digital ghost again, who it turns out might actually be real. But real or not, the stealth is still lame, and the game makes us do this hide and seek thing with the monster like 3 times. But since I'm such a pro at observer at this point, we're able to reach the core where all of a sudden everything's revealed. Or is it? I could say that about like every plot point in this game. Trying to shut down the signal, the digital ghost appears, killing a woman, and morphs into a giant mass of tentacles. We try to escape, but we're engulfed in the sludge, where we're finally shown Dan's full story. Now, before I show you this, we need to quickly discuss Daniel as a character. Usually in these retrospectives, pretty early on, I do kind of a little breakdown on what the character's about, their history, everything like that. But in Daniel's case, it only makes sense to tell you about this right here, right now, because a lot of things that happen in Observer only happen because Daniel has had an incredibly bad run of luck in his life. So to rewind a little bit, when you're in the apartment block, it's possible to find these radios lying around, and listening to them, we can hear the story of a boy whose father got the nanophage and became violent. It's also implied that the father hurt the son. But in these audio recordings, a doctor is attempting to find out if the boy has any symptoms of the nanophage.
I want my mom and dad.
I'm afraid that's not possible right now. Your parents are very sick.
And that's kind of the general theme of the first 3 radio tapes. But the 4th is where things get really interesting. While in the Chiron facility, we can actually talk to a woman trapped inside one of the containment units, and she asks Daniel to look for her son, since his father has apparently become violent. The strange thing, however, is how the conversation ends.
If I can find him, I'll get him out.
Thank you. You've always been such a good boy.
What did you say?
Which leads me to the final audio tape we can find.
Daniel? Daniel, please come out. It's time for our talk. Ow! Get back here, you little shit!
Don't just stand there, get after him!
Dr. Lannis, your suit.
What? No. Get me a... What the hell are you doing? I'm ordering you. Let me out of here, you bitch!
Yep, the kid on the tape is a young Daniel Lazarski, and after we find this out, it gives us a pretty clear insight into what his character motivations are and how they led him into being so miserable in life. So pretty much from what I can gather, Daniel's parents were infected with the nanophage and were taken away by Chiron after his father grew violent. But having no augments himself, Daniel was eventually given a clean bill of health and released. And although his ordeal was over, he was now alone in the world, and he had augmentations to blame for it. Years later, Daniel became a cop, and during his career, he met a woman named Laura. Over the next few years, they fell in love and eventually got married, having a boy they named Adam. One night, however, Laura awoke gasping for air, saying something was wrong. Going to the doctors, Laura was told that the illness was treatable, although she would have to undergo heavy augmentation. Obviously, Daniel still had trauma from his childhood regarding the nanophage, and he urged Laura to fight the disease without getting the operation.
Oh, thank you, Doctor. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Did you hear that, Dan?
I'm not sure about this.
Not sure. Didn't you hear? This is great news.
Let's take some more time to think about it.
What is there to think about? You should be happy.
Who says I'm not happy?
There must have been a misunderstanding. I was told you decided not to undergo the augmentation procedure.
Yes.
Just to be clear, you do realize that drastically decreases your chances of recovery?
I made my decision. Thank you.
Honey, I'm proud of you. You can do this. I know you can.
Although this didn't end up working, and on her deathbed, she made Daniel make her a promise.
You owe me this much. Promise me you'll take care of him. Whatever it takes.
And with that, Laura died, leaving Daniel and Adam behind. But the trials didn't stop, as years later, Daniel was badly injured on a police job, so hurt that he required extensive augmentation to survive. Remembering his promise though, he took the augment.
Listen, it's either this, or spend the rest of your life in a fucking jar.
No.
Think of your kid. Who's gonna take care of him? What is it, Dan?
Whatever it takes.
30 cc's of cortisone stat. I need any non-medical staff added.
Hang in there, buddy. They're gonna fix you up real good.
But this led to Adam resenting him, believing he was a hypocrite. And this brings us to the end of the timeline, where it's revealed that the digital ghost chasing us this whole time
didn't know any better.
You stood on principle when it was her life on the line. But when it comes to saving yourself, you're pragmatic all of a sudden?
I had to take care of you. I made a promise to her.
No, you don't get to use her as an excuse. Not after what happened.
What did you want me to do? Give up?
That's what you made her do. Every time I look at you, I see this monster that killed my mom.
Is us.
We made it. I finally understand.
So this monster is actually Daniel's subconscious image of himself. He sees himself as a monster that killed his own wife and is now just as bad as his own father. He's augmented more than he ever wanted to be, and somehow, through his life, he's become exactly what he fears most. An abomination with no family, no humanity, and no reason to keep going except to seek out a new person to hurt. As for what I think about this reveal, it's a bit iffy, even as someone who knows quite quite a lot about Observer's lore, there's still a lot of like gray area in how this monster works or why it's even a thing. And it really stops the whole thing from being a big, oh moment. You don't instantly go like, oh, that makes sense. Like for me, it just doesn't really click, but I do like that Daniel's worst enemy in this game is just himself. A really cool detail, by the way, is this jump scare. I talked about it earlier in the video, but now that we're here, I want to talk a little bit about the deeper meaning, because usually in this apartment, you can speak to a family of immaculates. These are people who in the world of Observer have no modifications of any kind.
I know our lives will be shorter and less comfortable, but it's a price we're willing to pay for experiencing the purity of our God-given bodies.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of implants, but I couldn't do what I do without them.
Yes, you carry them within you.
It wasn't really a choice, you know?
Oh, but clearly it was. The world would be a better place if more people realized that.
And what we can talk to them about is honestly kind of irrelevant, but what I do find interesting is that a monster representing Daniel is hiding in an apartment full of people who don't like augments, much like how Daniel was before his accident. It's like the jump scare is almost doubling down on Daniel's perception of being a hypocrite. It's like the monster is saying, you think you're like the people in here, but you're really not. Overall on the reveal, I think it could have been done a little bit better, not even because the delivery is bad, but because I think the other side of Daniel's story is honestly a little bit more interesting. Like, I completely understand why we see the monster killing Laura and everything like that, but the Daniel monster is, in my opinion, way more interesting when talking about his childhood and how what happened to his father scarred him enough to swear off augments for life. Like, you don't have to get rid of the Laura storyline, but I do think the childhood storyline should have been more tightly woven in. Anyways, let's get back to the story. Next thing we know, Daniel finds himself in a digital void where we come face to face with something resembling Adam.
What the hell is this?
The core. You made your way here. Now let me in.
But this isn't right. Aren't we meant to be turning off Chiron's lockdown signal? Well, Adam begins to explain, and if I'm being honest, does a really shit job at it. So, hi everyone, it's me, B4 Brandos. I'm here to fill in. But I need you to buckle in because I'm about to throw everything you believed about this game out the window. So pretty much what we learn from Adam is that in this game of misdirection, mystery, and not being able to tell what is real and what is not, as it turns out, a large amount of information that we've been operating off of isn't true. Anyone here shocked? Anyone? No? Okay. So to get down to it, we need to wind the clocks back a couple of years, back to just after Laura died. And as expected, little Adam was not taking the loss very well. He blamed Daniel for her death and became obsessed with improving the human condition. Remember those RC cars I talked about earlier? Well, if you find all three of them around the apartment block, a room in Helena's dream sequence actually unlocks. And heading inside, we can find the memory of when this all started for him, with Adam obsessively learning to pull apart and rebuild his RC car.
Take it apart. Put it back together. Until I understand. Until I can remake it. Make it better. Make it perfect.
But back on the timeline, Adam grew more and more resentful of his father the older he got, and eventually disappeared. But Adam wasn't trying to get away from his father, he had a mission, and took a concept of a project to Chiron. This project was essentially going to allow people to digitize their minds, creating a copy of a person, or hopefully a full-on transferal of a mind. In my opinion, I think Adam was trying to create a world where something like the human body wouldn't get in the way of life. He wanted a world where his mother could have had a chance. Now, Adam was on this project for a while until Chiron grew impatient and attempted to shut it down. But not wanting to lose his dream, he went underground and began working out of the stacks. Here he met the disgraced surgeon Jack Carnes, who admired what Adam was trying to do and let him use his lab for his experiments. He also helped in recruiting Helena for data smuggling.
Come here. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And it was all going pretty well. Helena eventually smuggled all of Adam's data out of Chiron and he could resume work on the project. But there were some complications. See, back at the start of the game in Adam's apartment, if you looked around hard enough, you could actually find a trophy, and scanning it, we can find a data chip inside. At the time, Daniel's tech couldn't decipher it, but if you took it to the Ripperdoc clinic, you could actually find a decipher tool, and plugging it in, we could gain access to Adam's development logs. It seems that he was trying to create this new AI brain thingamajiggy by replicating himself. The only problem was that most of them were ridden with anxiety, depression, mania, disassociation. As it turns out, shoving a human consciousness inside of a computer is not very fun. Finally, on October 10th, 2083, Adam created a perfect copy of himself. He had no mental problems, no memory problems. It was perfect. But then over the next few months, as Adam improved this version, he began to feel paranoid.
I think my subconscious is starting to seep into my waking hours. The other day, I could swear I heard whispering coming from the black box. Since that's clearly impossible, I have to attribute the symptoms to sleep deprivation.
And we don't know what set off the chain of events, but at some point very close to the start of the game, Adam 2.0, that's what I'm calling the AI, escaped containment and got into the net. In order to stop him, Adam 1.0 sent a virus after him. Knowing the virus was going to get him eventually, Adam 2.0 put a plan into motion. First, he called Daniel, impersonating Adam 1.0, beckoning him to the stacks. Next, to stop Chiron from tracking him, he manipulated the local splicer into going crazy and killing everyone involved in his project. Also, can I just add here how fucking lucky Adam 2.0 is that Adam 1.0 just happened to develop him in a building that a splicer lunatic prime for manipulation was living under? Like Adam 2, what were you gonna do if Victor hadn't been bullied his whole life? Were you gonna blackmail the postman into killing Adam 1? Anyways, once Daniel arrives at the stacks, Adam triggered the Nanophage lockdown, and you kind of know what happened after that. But you might be wondering, why did Adam 2.0 summon his dad? Well, it's because observers exist on their own private network, separate from the rest of the net, or in other words, safe from any and every virus that could be after you. So Adam 2.0's plan is to convince Daniel to let him live in his network, aka his brain, which if he says yes, will essentially merge his mind with Adam's. So that's the whole deal. That's what this has all been about. This is all happening because Adam 2.0 is trying to escape the virus that Adam 1.0 sent after him. And we're kind of just here because we're the only observer Adam knows. We're just like, okay, how do I escape the building's network? Oh, I have to call my dad. Oh, fuck. But now we're given a choice. We can either trust the AI that killed our son, that believes it's our son, or we can tell it to go fuck itself. And to say the least, both these endings are pretty bleak.
I can't believe there isn't a part of Adam left. He is part of you. That's true. I won't let you die. I make my promise, and I intend to keep my word.
Thank you, Father.
So in the first ending, if we embrace him, Adam and Daniel's minds do merge, and we get this final cutscene.
Down has now been lifted. Thank you for your cooperation.
Hey, you. Look down. I know, Janice. It's been taken care of.
Called your people. Should be here any minute.
Thank you. I'll take over from here. You can get back to your post.
You good? Huh?
Yeah. Just a slight glitch. I'll take care of it.
Little ones. Huh? Worst. Always spell trouble.
Don't I know it? The sun will come up soon. We'll get to see it together again. No worries. We'll get used to this. We have all the time in the world.
Yikes. So it seems that Adam 2.0 wasn't totally truthful with us, whatever he's not who he says he is means, but you know, there's nothing we can really do now, so let's just hope the second ending's better. In the alternate ending, which I kind of consider to be the canon ending, if we reject Adam, he reveals that we never left the VR pod at Sanctuary and has been chipping away at our firewall in case we pushed him away. Adam then forces Daniel out of his body and into the cleaner bot and leaves.
I regret it must end this way. You see, without a willing host, I need to force you out. Fortunately, I have found a better place for you. Sorry, Dad.
Luckily, just before the drone runs out of battery, Janus shows up and Daniel forcefully takes over his body to pursue Adam. Also, as we take over Janus's body, we can see why he's always repeating, "Need to get out."
Need to get out. Sorry, Janus. No other way.
It seems like he's always repeating that because it might just be the last coherent memory the guy has. So he's just constantly reliving the worst moment of his life. But heading out of Sanctuary, we hear the lockdown has been lifted, and catching up to Adam, Daniel does a Batman Arkham beatdown on him just as the police arrive.
The situation is under control.
This is the police! Come out with your hands up! Freeze!
An EMT then runs over and checks Adam's pulse.
God, what a mess. Is he breathing? Wait, checking. I think
with Daniel dying just before we hear if Adam is still alive or not. And that's Observer, a flawed but beautiful game with an absolute gut punch ending no matter which way you slice it. One thing I find really great about both of these endings too is that it's left so vague. You don't know what to think. Is this Adam real or is he an imitator? It's left ambiguous, which I really like. I mean, to be honest, it's ambiguous how much of the game actually happens. There's so many little inconsistencies that show up during the story, and it means you can't really trust anything you see after the Amir interrogation. Like, for one, we definitely know that Adam 2.0 is a thing. Since the moment you enter the apartment, sometimes you can catch cameras turning on as soon as you get close, and they follow you around. It's actually a really eerie detail that I didn't even notice until I was writing the script. There's at least one camera on every floor that will switch on when it sees you. But then there's other strange occurrences. Like in the tattoo parlor, the music that plays seems to have a robotic voice in the background saying, "My son is dead." Or do you remember when the Wolfman bashed in the door? Well, if you head back to the door after you escape the basement, it's not damaged at all. And how about how Daniel sees his Dream Eater hand as a human hand from the very beginning of the game, but whenever we see Daniel from anyone else's perspective, he's got a robot one. There's also in the Doctor's dream, when you see him mysteriously strung up in the same pose that Victor is in after he attacks Daniel. And how realistic is it really that a 50-year-old would survive a fall like that? Hell, I wouldn't survive a fall like that. I'm not saying that none of the game happens, but I really do like that you can't really tell what's actually going on. Of course, there's footnotes of what's actually happening, like Adam, Helena, Amir, and Jack have all been murdered by Adam 2.0, but the specifics aren't really something we can analyze because the specifics aren't reliable. It's cool because you can see Adam 2.0 as the antagonist of the game, but we have a super unreliable viewpoint.
Am I fucking losing it?
And Adam 1.0 was doing some serious drugs when he released the virus on Adam 2.0. Who's to say what's actually going on here? Who's the actual good guy? Who's the bad guy? But yeah, I would actually like to hear what you guys think of the story. Just drop a comment. Tell me what you think is real, what actually happened, what didn't, what Adam 2.0 actually is. Just let me know your theories, because Observer is a super underrated game, and I just wish more people were theory crafting for it. Like, usually for my videos, I rely on the wiki for a lot of like deep cut lore stuff, but in this one, I had to do this all myself. Like, the wiki for this game is so incomplete that someone has written a fan fiction about Adam on Adam's character page instead of writing about Adam as a character. But hey, being vague and confusing and not very helpful is kind of what Observer is all about. Its world isn't really meant to be an easily decipherable story of good and bad. It's a world of gray morality where you yourself are left to kind of decide what you think about a certain situation. And I think that this isn't shown any better than in the side cases. So half the magic of Observer is the apartment block. Bloober created this living, breathing world in such a tiny space. It's really impressive. By the way, this apartment building is actually a real building in Krakow that Bloober team had access to. And I really love it because it actually shows up in another Bloober game called The Medium, which came out in 2023. In this game, the main character actually lives in this apartment block, and even Bloober has implied it is the same one that Daniel runs around in a couple decades later. And yes, I did buy the game just so I could run around the apartment block and see if I could find some Observer Easter eggs. And there are. So this is a really cute one. If you go to where Janus's office is in Observer, you can find graffiti that reads, "Need to get out."
Yeah. Who doesn't?
And then there's another detail I found that I don't think anyone's ever noticed, but in the courtyard, look at that bike! That's Victor's bike!
No, not like this.
Now, granted, The Medium takes place in 1999, and Victor was born in 2057, but I don't know, maybe this belonged to Victor's father or grandfather, or maybe I'm reading too much into this little reference to another game they made. Nah, I'd never do that. Anyways, I'm way off track. As I was saying, the little interactions you can experience in the world of Observer are what makes the game for me. Every nook and cranny of this apartment building has something to look at, and now I'm gonna show it all to you. So the first side case is something you can find when talking to the resident of apartment 113. Answering the door is a young girl named Paulina, and the conversation seems to be going all right until this little hiccup.
How old are you, Paulina?
34. 9, you silly.
So you're all alone in there?
Yes. Well, not really. I'm playing with Pieta.
Your little sister?
She's a special friend. Only I can see her.
I had an invisible friend too when I was her age. Called him Tom.
Pieta thinks you're full of shit.
Something's not right here. And if we investigate the neighboring apartment, we can find this woman plugged into this chair. And we decide to do a neural interrogation on her. Why? Well, I don't know, for funsies, I guess. Daniel just neurally interrogates anyone he can get his hands on in person. Fun fact, by the way, this is the only interrogation Daniel does in the entire game where it's not on a dead or dying person. This is normal. But once we do plug in, we get some more information on what apartment 113's whole deal is. And we learn that the older woman in the chair is named Pieta and is terminally ill, while the girl we talk to is called Paulina and has an extreme form of autism that means she will never be able to function independently. Pieta and Paulina both seem to share a consciousness, and talking to Pieta near the end of the interrogation shows that she's desperate to re-establish the connection that the lockdown severed. Now, it's important to note that Pieta originally purchased Paulina in order to force her out of her body and pretty much like insert her mind into it. However, after they started connecting, Paulina started to get better. Her extreme form of autism wasn't affecting her as much as it used to be. Pieta from here became a bit torn on the issue. She began to care for Paulina and had second thoughts of actually taking over her body. So once we exit the neural interrogation, we actually have a choice to make. We can either reboot the system, which would sever the connection between Pieta and Paulina, or we can re-establish the connection. Now here, the most interesting thing happens when you re-establish the connection, and after we do that, we can head over to Paulina's room and find that the door is actually open. but the room is completely empty. It seems that Pieta and Paulina have merged minds and have gone out into the world together, or so it seems. Looking around the room, we can find a toy hidden under this desk, and scanning it shows sentient activity. I think that it's possible that the lockdown scared Pieta enough to the point that she re-examined her priorities and realized that she kind of wanted to live more than she wanted to foster this girl. So yeah, it's completely possible that Pieta did lie to us and did exactly what Adam does to us if we reject him, forcing Paulina out of her own body and into this toy. It also wouldn't be the first time. You know that janitor robot? Well, I'm 90% sure it's sentient or has a consciousness within it, because Janus mentions it's always wandering off, and we can find it in a few weird situations around the apartment, including bashing its head into a wall. Also, to double down on this, if you look closely, it's trying to hit its own off switch. So yeah, just like human life in this world, consciousness is cheap and to be played with. It's horrible to think about, but then again, it's just a theory and we have no way to confirm this, which is, you know, what I like about Observer. Overall, I like this mission. It's eerie. It's also really tough to make the right call since it seems like we're seriously not getting the full picture. Definitely a 9 pigeons out of 10 mission. Another one of my favorite case files is in this apartment with the broken shutter door. Heading inside, we find that whoever owns this apartment is an organ seller. And if we use the computer, we can learn of a basement unit owned by whoever lives in this apartment. And you remember back when we were in the basement and I mentioned that there was some sort of weird screeching? Well, if you go back down into the basement and look for the storage unit owned by the person who lives in this apartment and enter the code we get from his PC, we can head inside to find this absolute abomination.
Fuck. A living organ farm. It must be in agony.
The player from this point is given the choice to either remove the creature's life support or restore its pain medication and virtual reality simulation. Honestly, no matter what you do, whether you consider it good or bad, it really leaves a sour taste in your mouth. So yeah, I really like this side mission. It's fucked up. 9 pigeons out of 10. So this is probably the lamest side case out of all of them. After Amir's interrogation, you can find his stash of drugs with apartment numbers on him, and Daniel decides he should go talk to these guys for some reason. And each one is kind of interesting. Daniel just shows up and goes, "So I heard you were buying drugs. Not very legal, is it?" But nothing really changes. You can either give each resident a hard time or not. It doesn't really matter, because even if Dan's like, "I'll be back for you," we all know he really won't. One client that does stick out to me though is when we go and talk to this guy who used to be a pro boxer, a boxer that Daniel actually used to watch.
We're trying to rule out the phage. Doesn't seem to bother you. Hey, are we having fun or what?
As it turns out though, after his contract ended, it would have cost him $2 million per year to hold on to his implants. And considering this guy was augmented to be a boxer, bro was pretty kitted out. Anyways, he got all of his augments repoed, and the reason he buys drugs from Amir is to help manage the pain. And bro, this is what Daniel has to say in response to this information.
He brings me stuff sometimes.
Well, that's too bad because he's dead now. I gotta go.
Whoa. Hey, hold on, Lazarski. What did you say?
I said I gotta go.
Fuck man, Burrow is just a professional asshole, isn't he? Overall, pretty okay side mission, 6 pigeons out of 10. The final thing I want to talk about in the original isn't really a case file, but instead an interaction. If you interact with this apartment speaker, a fembot comes to the door instead of a human. Oh, by the way, fembots in the Observer universe are a thing that you buy if you can't get a girlfriend.
You're not a bot, are you?
Yes, Femcom 6.0.
A sex bot. Whoopee.
Daniel doesn't take her very seriously though, and he's kind of just a dick until the end of the conversation when something really uncanny happens.
Okay. I'd say goodbye, but I guess there's no point.
Yeah, 'cause that would humanize me.
What did you say?
Please feel free to use me.
Dude, Daniel cannot catch a break. He's constantly reminded of how much of an asshole he is even when he's not talking to a real person. But yeah, that's the case files you can pursue in the original, and I actually really enjoy following up on them. Observer may be a pretty linear game, but there is just something really cool about stumbling into a room you've never been in and just going, what the fuck is happening in here? It's just the little things like that which make Observer so great for me. The C-class block isn't just a backdrop for the story, it is a story itself. It's a snapshot of the state of humanity in this world. It's dark, it's dingy, grimy. Every floor tells us a bit of history about this world, about the people that live in it. And overall, it looks very hopeless. Really, I think that Jack Carnes puts it best in an audio tape you can find in his tattoo parlor.
Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. It is the 7th day of my forcefully imposed penance, and I can already attest without any doubt that this place is in fact hell. These people are dead. Dead to the world. Their bodies still shuffle around their tiny apartments, but their minds are long gone.
So after Observer came out, there was a small amount of fanfare. Jacksepticeye played exactly half the game and then fucking dropped it. I'm never gonna forgive him for that.
Alright, I think I'm gonna leave this episode here.
Forever.
Whatever, it seems like a good place to
put down the game and never pick it up again.
And overall, the general consensus on the game was that it was competently made when it came to story and atmosphere, but seriously lacked in the gameplay department. So yeah, the foundation was laid. They had a great world they had built. They had a story that no matter which way you sliced it, ended on a cliffhanger, and they had problems with the first game that could be easily rectified. They had an opportunity to make the best cyberpunk horror game ever. All we needed was a sequel. But since Rutger Hauer unfortunately died in 2019, nobody thought it was possible. However, on January 23rd, 2020, Bloober Team released a teaser called Incoming Call. And this video wasn't super special, it was pretty much a live wallpaper, but in binary code at the top of the screen, there was a hidden message that read, "Daniel, are you there?" And boom, it was official. Observer was coming back for a remaster. So yeah, it turns out that Bloober was actually working on a remaster. They call it a remake, but is it really a remake if it plays the same, feels the same, and just looks a little bit different? I mean, calling Observer System Redux a remake is kind of like calling BioShock Remastered a remake because they added seaweed. But look, being as we've already established that I am Observer's #1 fan, I was pretty excited for this game. I had already tore my way through the original, found all the secrets, talked to all the residents. I was hungry for something new, and from the sounds of it, System Redux was gonna give me that. I mean, they were promoting some crazy stuff. New gameplay mechanics, better graphics, new missions with unheard Rutger Hauer voice lines. I was so ready.
Heart rate irregular.
And then it came out, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I was a little disappointed. Now let me set the stage for you. I love the original Observer. It is just this really competently made, tightly wound package that just works. But in the lead up to System Redux's launch, they delisted the original on Steam. Now I might be having some sort of Bernstein Bears Mandela effect right now, but I could have sworn back when this was happening, there was some sort of community post saying that they believed System Redux was the definitive way to play Observer, but I can't find it anywhere. So anyways, in this universe, we actually don't know why the original was taken off Steam, but the general intent kind of seems to be the same. It seems like they are saying this is the best way to play Observer. Booting up System Redux, all I could think of was this needs to be the best version of Observer playable, otherwise you are locking all the new players out of experiencing the magic of the original. And so I played through the game, oohing and ahhing at every detail. I mean, this game looks really good. The human models are fantastic, the animations are great, the lighting is good. If I am being honest, I do miss the slightly green tinge everything had in the original, but that's not a huge thing for me. In fact, there wasn't anything in the Redux I really didn't like, but there were just little things that kept pulling me out of the experience. Parts of the game weren't lit properly, there were strange little additions to the story that kind of spoiled surprises early, and worst of all, those brand new missions with unheard dialogue kind of suck. So for some background, there are 3 new case files in Observer System Redux: Errant Signal, Family Ties, and Her Fearful Symmetry. These were all missions that were cut from the original game, but got added back in for this one, and all of them start really strong. So I'll begin with my favorite mission, which is Family Ties. In the original Observer, you could enter this apartment and find a guy that's hung himself because he thinks he's got the nanophage.
Fuck.
But in this one, we can actually conduct a neural interrogation on him and experience his story. By the way, before we go into this mission, I do want to point out something that's equal parts funny and sad when it comes to the voice lines. And that's that earlier in the game, when we go to interrogate Helena, Daniel says,
"This better be worth it,"
before plugging himself in. But then in the new side missions, bro says the exact same thing.
"This better be worth it. This better be worth it."
Like, obviously the sad side of this thing is that Rutger Hauer had passed by the time this game came out, so they had to work with what voice lines they did have in order to make the new missions work. But System Redux was marketed on the fact that they were using unheard Rutger Hauer voice lines. Are you telling me that they had voice lines for a bunch of random shit around the game, but they didn't have a spare plug-in line just lying around, or even a line that suited the situation? It takes you out of it so much, because this game is so immersive, it's hard to break that immersion, but then Daniel just spamming the same line over and over again gets really funny, man. Like, Daniel, what are you doing to yourself? This is not gonna help you find your son. You're not meant to connect to dead people, and this guy connects to every single one he finds. Guys, I think we just need to get Dan away from police work and into the casino. I think it's just gonna be a safer environment for his impulse control. Because now, instead of giving himself brain damage, he'll just be going from slot machine to slot machine with like $5 going.
"This better be worth it. Fuck. This better be worth it. Fuck.
Anyways, back on track, we go to plug in, Daniel hits the "this better be worth it," and we enter probably the best mission of the game. Pretty much, this guy's wife was sick with the nanophage, and the dead guy was unbelievably paranoid about Chiron taking care of her. So in an attempt to save her, hanging guy accidentally pulled her off life support, leading to his daughter resenting him. After this, hanging guy's paranoia only worsened, and he became convinced everyone had the nanophage. The lockdown at the start of Observe was the final straw for this guy though, and he hung himself, believing it would be better than getting sick or continuing to live with the guilt of what he did. After experiencing the memory, Daniel can choose to write an email to the guy's daughter explaining what happened, and overall I think it's a great mission. Endearing, immersive, tragic, and satisfying. Hopefully the other 2 side missions will be just as high quality. Also, I really like whoever they got to voice like the hanging guy. Just the way he says, "I'm not sick." Oh, he just really puts a lot of into it, you know?
"I'm not sick. I am not sick.
I'm not sick. I'm not sick." 9 pigeons out of 10. So Her Fearful Symmetry is definitely another favorite of mine. It's not necessarily good because of its content, but the premise is super funny. Pretty much the whole mission is about Daniel hunting down this absolute gooner that's loose in the block, and the whole thing starts when we find this sort of love shrine near the start of the game. Reading the computer text file, whoever made this shrine is infatuated with someone in the building, and each one we find through the apartment gets increasingly sinister. Daniel then decides he's got to hunt this guy down, and locating his apartment, we head inside, finding the walls are covered in...
What the fuck?
Okay, so YouTube has prohibited that word. I can't say it. But since they all think you're children, it's yogurt. Yeah, it is. It's yogurt that would also light up under a black light. I also find it really funny that Daniel spends the whole night scanning people with their guts hanging out, and he's fine with that. He spends a couple of hours walking around a place that the nanophage could be loose in, and he's good. On more than one occasion, bro takes a fucking nap on a blood-covered floor, but it's that nearly gives bro a heart attack. Maybe bro just hates like the human reproductive system or something. You know, that's probably why he's such a dick to his son or something like that. But reading this gooner's computer, we find that he's been doing research on if buildings can be sentient, and we discover that he has a basement lot rented out. So heading down there, we find that he's been digging. I repeat, digging. He has been excavating a hole in his apartment building with what seems to be a hammer. I feel like I'm playing that mission from Ready or Not where all the crackheads have built this underground tunnel system between all their crack houses.
These are some creepy fucking sketches.
But heading inside, after a bit of walking, we find the Pro-Gooner's body, which has been crushed by a door, and conducting a neural interrogation.
This better be worth it.
We learn that this guy is literally in love with the apartment block. And I'm not joking when I say there's nothing else to it. In the neural interrogation, you walk around aimlessly for fucking ages, then head down to the basement and get crushed in a door just as the lockdown gets put into place. Great work, Dan. The guy that got crushed in a door walked around the apartment block and then walked down here and got crushed by a door. I'm glad we were able to determine the cause of death, you know? But yeah, this was definitely like the first mission that let me down and started to change my outlook on system Redux. Like, it started so strong and ended so weak. But honestly, if disappointing was the name of the game here, then the next mission would be the winner. 5 pigeons out of 10, by the way. An errant signal has one of the strongest intros out of all the side missions. Opening your gauntlet display, you're suddenly greeted by a desperate plea for help alongside an apartment number. And heading to the apartment, I honestly can't show anything inside this room because it violates the 2 big no-nos of YouTube, which is, of course, sex and violence. Sex because there's a lot of sex toys around, and violence because there's a lot of blood everywhere. But logging onto a nearby computer, we learn that whoever owns this apartment has been talking about drugging women and keeping them in the basement compartment, which I've got to say is probably the most normal crime we've heard of in this game. But heading down there, we can find a room full of fembots that are under construction, and reading an email, we can learn that these bots aren't stable and attacked the apartment owner while he was testing them. That's why there's blood everywhere. One of my favorite things about this mission, though, is about half of it is about Daniel trying to access this computer. And if there's one game that made me feel like an old dude that's trying to use a computer, it's this one. But after a bit of wrestling with the PC, we suddenly get pulled into a conversation with some sort of entity. And this thing says it's trapped and it needs our help. But after talking a bit, it eventually breaks down into saying nothing but help us. And we get this scene.
Not finished.
Matriarch, what's going on here?
And that is mission over. Yeah, I know. You know, what pisses me off most about this is that most case files end with Daniel being unable to investigate further, which is usually why we get ambiguous endings to these side cases. But this one is wide open. Like, if anything, Dan should be more motivated to investigate this case after that, because this jump scare is one of the few in Observer that is actually happening in the real world. But nah, Daniel just goes like, what a crazy experience. You know, maybe like Dan's just doing this stuff for kicks and he sees this case and he's just like, oh, this is gonna take ages. You know, I actually haven't found my son yet. Goodbye. Also, I feel like this mission is meant to be incredibly disturbing, but it's just way too vague on the details of what's actually happening here for me to actually feel anything about it. Like, they mentioned they've been kidnapping women in that email, but what are they doing? Are they transferring their minds into the fembots? Are the fembots sentient? We don't really get a clue, which makes the whole mission just that little bit more frustrating. Like, this could have been the best mission between System Redux and the OG, but it's like they just kind of lost interest halfway through. So yeah, that's gonna be a 6 out of 10 pigeons for me, but I want to stress how fine the line between giving it a 6 and a 10 out of 10 could have been. All they needed to do was just put a bit more meat on that bone and it would have been great. Now, after all the side missions, there were some other additions to the game. They now added a mini game for hacking instead of just playing an animation. They also tweaked a couple of cutscenes, especially the ones that show the Wolfman. Personally, I'm not really a fan of them since it obscures Victor in a way where you don't really get that what the fuck is that moment. Also, near the end of Victor's interrogation, they add a whole new cutscene that spoils Adam's death. Like the white dough head glitches into Adam's head where it can be seen clearly, and then it shows a cutscene of Victor's lair. It just straight up spoils it for no reason. Like the player was gonna find all of this stuff out in 10 minutes. I just cannot fathom why they did something like this. It completely fucks the flow of the story. But yeah, that's System Redux's new bits of content. Really, I think I wouldn't have such a bone to pick with this game if they hadn't delisted the original from Steam, because I wholeheartedly believe that even with the new side missions, better graphics, and extra bits of gameplay, the original is the superior version. It's actually kind of funny when you think about it, because System Redux really does embody the DNA of the modern remaster. It just adds some random stuff while also plaguing the thing with endless bugs and performance issues. I mean, it really does feel like they didn't get anyone to playtest the rest of the game. There were times when I had to restart because the world wasn't interactable. Most of the time, Daniel's synchronization bar didn't move when he wasn't moving, making it kind of seem like Daniel is absolutely brain dead. There's also some strange stuff happening with the dream sequence endings. Like, they go on for quite a long time, and sometimes they don't even drop you back into the game properly. For example, this is what the end of Helena's dream sequence looks like in the original Observer, and here's what happened for me in System Redux.
Caution, low synchronization. Administer synchrozine.
There's just all these tiny things that pull you out of the experience. At least in the original, they got the pigeons pathfinding right. Like, come on. Even if they didn't playtest this thing, you'd think they'd at least catch these pigeons hitting the 360 no-scopes on the main menu, right? So yeah, I'm not like a huge fan of System Redux. I mean, one thing I did like that they added is this beautiful homage to Rutger Hauer in the attic. And if you've watched Blade Runner, you know what this is and why it's important. But apart from those small little things like that, System Redux is just kind of, I don't know where the secret sauce went, but it's been drained out of this product somehow. So all up, I give the original Observer a big fat 8 out of 10 and the Redux a nice little 5 out of 10. In conclusion, I think that Observer was a half home run. They had a great idea for a story and a world, but then when it came to the gameplay, the dev team just didn't have the goods. With a game like the Silent Hill 2 remake now, it's very clear that they've learned to mix gameplay with their incredible world crafting, and I'm really excited to see where the dev studio goes from here. In the end, Observer is a game about consequences. The consequences of war, of reckless augmentations, of making promises. Every character in the game is living with the consequences of something they've done. Daniel got his wife killed and pushed his son away because of it. Adam desperately chased a world without death and became too callous to see he was going too far. Jack hurt people in his pursuit of what he saw as a better future. Helena couldn't see the writing on the wall when she was in too deep. And look, this isn't some sort of insanely profound character writing we're talking about here. Every piece of media ever has characters that are dealing with consequences. But what makes Observer special is its direct focus on consequences, and more importantly, how people deal with them. Because many of the characters in the game are all running from them. But even if the player recognizes this and tries to get Dan to keep his promise he made to Laura, it doesn't turn out well for him, no matter what. And that's what I've always liked about Observer. Talking to the residents of the C-class block shows us every side of humanity in this world that there is. And if it proves one thing, it's that there's no right or wrong in this world. There's only different perspectives. A lesson learned is not a wrong made right. A justified action may not be a morally acceptable action. There are no winners in this world. There's just Chiron, and then there's everybody else. Hello everybody, I haven't done an end of video talk in quite a while, but I wanted to come in here and just have a little chat about some things related to the channel. Now first things first, if you're seeing this and if you legitimately made your way all the way here by watching the entire video, thank you so much. It means a lot to me that you've given me your time to allow me to try and entertain you, and I hope that you did find this video, quite interesting. I also hope that you might have learned something from it or gained a new appreciation for Observer, or maybe even want to play it now. If you feel you've gotten any of those things out of this video, then I feel I've done my job well. As for why this video didn't come out in January, I was working on a Soma video and I was very confident in it, but then I just couldn't crack the script. I was having so much trouble because Soma is just a huge walking simulator. You're just always just trotting around. Half the fun of Soma is the incredible depths of lore that you can get into with it. But the only issue is, with my retrospectives, I really like to balance gameplay and story, but with walking sims, there's just such a small amount of gameplay to actually talk about. So yeah, I was having a lot of trouble writing this script, and eventually I was just like, this is getting ridiculous, and I've been banging my head against this script for weeks now, and I'm not getting any videos done, and it was like really affecting my mental health. So I decided I needed to switch things up, and I needed to take a different approach. So I went back to the Observer script, which I had dropped for the exact same reason a couple months back, but I love Observer way more than Soma, so I figured it might be a bit easier. So yeah, now here we are. The video is out if you're watching this, and I would like to know what you think. This is a bit of a different format to the usual one. It's just a necessity of the genre I'm covering. So yeah, if you let me know if it was good, if it was bad, things I need to improve, it will help me in the future, and I might even be able to take whatever you liked about this video and use it to probably complete that Soma video. Now, I want to assure you guys, my hiatus is now properly over. I know I say that a lot, but I have been planning a lot of the upcoming slate of this year, and I've got some really good stuff coming up. My camera just died. That was fun, like 3 sentences before I was done. But anyways, guys, I'm just going to ask you, please subscribe, please like, share the video, comment, any of them, all of them. I would appreciate literally anything. It helps me grow, it helps me get exposure, and it also helps me get money so that I can do this more often than not. Once again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoy getting dressed up and yelling at a camera for a couple of hours. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video, okay? Original Alien Isolation on your phone. Yeah, that's right. A couple of years ago, they actually made an Alien Isolation port for the iPhone. And it's honestly kind of impressive that they made this thing work, although I swear my iPhone 12 nearly exploded getting this footage. Let's see, what else is there? There's a novelization.